Boy, did you make a great call joining Dave Lapham in the trenches, brought to you by First Star Logistics today, because we have the legend. I'm talking Cris Collinsworth. I'm talking All-American. I'm talking Pro Bowler as a football player, All-American in Florida, Pro Bowler with the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm talking 17 Emmys. Come on now. This guy is the best. He is a football guru, and he talks Cincinnati Bengals draft, talks personnel. He talks about it only the way Cris Collinsworth can. Very informative, very understandable. Cris Collinsworth breaking it down with us. Sure do appreciate you joining us in the trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics once again. And we are in our brand new building, in our brand new studios. Everything's spit shined. We're ready to rock and roll. And with that, for the first time in our new studios, we're going to welcome a very, very, extremely, very special guest, none other than the legendary Cris Collinsworth. And this guy, the best way I can think of, one word that sums up Cris Collinsworth in my mind, and I've known him for quite a few years, is achiever. Everything this guy does, he achieves at the highest possible level. All-American in Florida. He's in the Athletic Scholar Athlete Hall of Fame. He's in Florida's Athletic Hall of Fame. He Pro Bowler multiple times with the Cincinnati Bengals. 17 Sports Emmy Awards. They're going to call it the Collinsworth when he's done, man. That's what it's going to be. And also, he's the majority owner of Pro Football Focus, which is a tool that everybody, all levels of football, can use to their advantage. Welcome, and really appreciate your time, my man, Cris Collinsworth.
My real skill is spit shining, though. I thought you were going to get me down for the in the studios. How are you, man?
How you be?
I'm good. You're going to test me early here, man. This is like a good opening day homework assignment to prove how much work you still have to do for the season. But okay, let's do this.
All right, I hear you, and it's going to be, a lot of Cincinnati Bengal oriented because played your whole career here with the Cincinnati Bengals. And Cris, what is it? I mean, what is the secret sauce, man? What's the secret to your success? Is it just, you know what? If I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, man. And I'm going to get it done. I mean, is that what you're all about?
I was always just scared. I'm not lying. So when I was playing, I was like, what's your motivation? Well, that was easy. I thought I was going to get cut all the time. I mean, you go to training camp. I mean, I was the second receiver taken in the Bengals draft. And I was the second pick, and they had taken another receiver, David Verser, in the first round. So that was plenty of motivation. That I didn't need any help with that.
Yeah.
But I always thought that you had to have two things going on at the same time. So when I was in school, playing football, whatever, but I always had a job. I mean, when I look back on it, it's hilarious. I've only had 3 jobs in my whole life. I was a janitor in high school. I was a football player, and I talked about football. That's a good life right there.
I'm telling you.
Like how do you get a whole lot better? The janitor job, that one was actually kind of fun too. So I was a janitor for a gynecologist. I won't even go into the details. I won't even talk about. So
sure you were. I mean, that makes perfect sense, man.
I'm just telling you. I've had an interesting life. I've had an interesting life.
Man, you're so good at what you do. It's a joy, man. You know what? You make football fun. That's what football is supposed to be, and you make it fun for a lot of people.
Well, and back at you, I think that the one thing that I think that people talk about when they're listening to you, and of course the highlights we get to hear when you get excited and touchdowns are scored, and that gets replayed on television and the whole thing. But I think that what people really enjoy and what people want out of a broadcaster, whether they admit it or not, is they want to learn something they didn't know.
Yep.
Like when I go to church on Sunday, no offense to the choirs or anything else, but I want to hear the sermon. Like I want to learn. I don't listen to music in my car very often. I listen to podcasts. I want somebody to tell me something that I didn't know. And so when people talk about your broadcasts, and I hope they say the same about mine, some of the research, some of the work, some of the details that we've studied during the course of the week,
right,
begin to come out. And it's not just somebody who's, watching the game like a fan in the stands, that there's some work behind it.
Right. And that's the thing that I respect tremendously about you. I mean, a lot of guys get to a certain level and, they quote, start to mail it in, and man, you're working as hard or harder than you ever have. I mean, you don't rest on your laurels. There's no question about that. I mean, you have a standard that you want to hit, man, and you're going to go and hit that every single opportunity you get. And that's admirable. I mean, people can learn from that in whatever walk of life. I mean, that's the key to success right there. And you are a success, my man.
Yeah, well, we're playing a four corners offense so far here today, trying to avoid either one of us looking like we're not prepared or ready to go. So we'll try and fool them one time here. We'll know a lot more, though, by the time they kick it off this year.
No doubt. No question about it. So, I know you probably looked at the Bengals draft a little bit with your PFF affiliation, obviously, and you were aware of everybody's draft. But the Cincinnati Bengals, I mean, to me, Kris, it wasn't, like sexy. It wasn't, oh, you got this quarterback, you got this, you got that. But they had like a specific need in mind and a value in mind at every round. And I thought they had, a really solid draft. I thought they addressed needs and they've got like a role in mind for every single draft pick that they took when they took them.
Yeah, I end up studying about the top 50 or 60 players in the draft, because I find that if a player, the first rounders, the second rounders tend to be factors right away, for all the teams that we have to cover. And if there is a third through seventh or free agent player that has an impact, it's fairly easy to study that player once you get to the game, right? So that's sort of how I try to go about it. It was interesting, and more about this than I do, having played the position. But once again, we're seeing the Bengals sort of attacking that tackle position, Amaruis Mims, and when you watch him, it's like nothing else. Send that kid off the bus first, right? Let's go scare him a little bit.
You're right.
Orlando Brown. I mean, these guys are just humongous. Trent Brown, all of them are. But with Joe Burrow and the injury history that he's had, I mean, let's face it. I think it's been every year, and now coming off the wrist injury, and the protection of this guy is paramount. I mean, they finished with a winning record last year, but they also finished last in the division. So the interesting thing when I look back on last year, and I don't know that people are looking at the AFC North as being the best division today in general conversation, but let's flip-flop one thing. The stunning thing that happened in my mind last year was the AFC Championship game. Kansas City, who had not played particularly well during the course of the year, had played inconsistently anyway during the course of the year, goes into Baltimore, one of the toughest places to try and go get a win, and knocks them off. And not only knocks them off, but I thought sort of at the very least matched their physicality, if not even beat them a little bit in the physical approach to the game. Travis Kelce, you can say what you want with everything going on in his life, but he was emotional that game. He was sort of picking fights. There was a rawness to that game. I mean, Andy Reid really had him ready to play football on that day. And the one thing that came about through the whole year was that Kansas City's defense really carried the day. And in that game, if you go back and watch it, it was a couple of quick strike touchdowns and up and down the field in the first quarter of that game. And then it really settled in to just a defensive war that was happening out there. And the the Kansas City Chiefs were able to hold on and win that game. But my point is, what if Baltimore had won the game and either lost the Super Bowl or won the Super Bowl? Everybody would be saying the same thing at this point right now, which is the AFC North is the killer division. The Bengals finished last in the division with a winning record. This is the division that is going to decide everything this year. And yet, because Baltimore lost that one game at home, it's really not the conversation that I think it probably should be.
That's a great point. Absolutely valid. No question about it. So with a guy like Mims, I mean, like you said, Kris, he didn't eight starts, 8 games. But you watch tape of him working against his teammates in an SEC program that is as good as there is, and 5 of his defensive linemen that he worked against in his years there were first-round draft picks. I mean, this guy, if he stays healthy, like you said, I mean, every way you can be big, he's big. He's tall, he's broad, he's wide, he's thick, he's everything, and that if you're not 6'8", 350, go home, man. You ain't playing. It's the Cincinnati skyline. It's another Cincinnati skyline. It's ridiculous. Yeah. So
what did you think about him? So, I was desperate for tape on him, right? Yeah. I just kept going back because everything that he has is perfect, right? Yeah. 6'8", 340, 36-inch arms. 36-inch arms, I mean, you have to – that's like on a normal human being, he could stick out his arms and it's a yardstick away, it's insane.
It is.
Huge hands, right around 5 flat in a 40-yard dash.
Yeah.
And he had a combined 682 snaps in 2 years, right? He never had more than 385 snaps in a year. And maybe that doesn't mean anything to anybody out there. But in general, like an NFL offensive lineman will play at least over 1,000 snaps. That's so that's the standard by which that he's going to have to be able to come in and play. But so I'm watching the Alabama tape, which everybody does the same thing that I do. You want to go see him against the top programs. And he played 11 plays in that game. Yeah. The 11 plays that he played were impressive plays. There was never a time that you go, oh, wow, he's not fast enough. He's not quick enough. He's not strong enough. He's not, he's not whatever.
Yeah.
And the term that I wrote down in my notes is, could he be Andrew Whitworth? And that's high praise. But Andrew Whitworth, especially at the end of his career, wasn't this ultra athlete that, you just got to stay in front of the guy on the edge for 2.5 seconds.
Right.
You can make $50 million. No, maybe not that. $25 million a year. If you can stay in front of those pass rushers for 2.5 seconds. It sounds ridiculously easy. It's ridiculously impossible. I mean, it really is. But this guy is athletic enough. I think, some of the other notes, I said, okay, his kick step's still a little slow, but he hasn't played enough to be able to do it. So it's interesting with, Orlando Brown, Trent Brown, some of these war horses who are the same kind of guy. I mean, Orlando Brown's, he's just trying to stay in front of somebody too, right?
Sure.
But I think that he can learn a few tricks of the trade. But my hope is that it finally settles one of those two positions for the Cincinnati Bengals for the next decade, because those are the teams ultimately that go on and win championships.
Yeah, I think you make a great point about, learning from he's got mentors, Orlando Brown, Trent Brown, both Pro Bowlers, both Super Bowl champions, 4 members of the offensive line are Super Bowl champions. I mean, he's going into a nice situation there, and he's a very smart kid, Kris. I mean, he like a 3.6 GPA, and when I've met him down there and talking to him, he's like on you. I mean, he's trying to be a sponge with everything. I think he's going to be a good one. I really do. I think he's got the right mindset. So in the second round, they lost DJ Reader, as we know, going up to Detroit, and wanted to shore up the interior of the defensive line with the second round pick, Kris Jenkins, captain out of Michigan. Just a typical guy you'd expect out of Michigan. A powerful guy. He can stack and shed with the best of them. Real violent hands. I like watching him play with that hand usage. And then at the first pick in the third round, they take McKinnley Jackson, a two-time captain at Texas A&M. And this guy's got length. He's got size. He's 330 pounds. The last probably true nose tackle left that they had rated pretty well. But he can get small when he needs to, a little bit slippery, You think they did a pretty good job addressing a need in the interior of the defensive line with a couple of guys that high?
Well, they better have, right? With what happens in this division right now. I mean, we're talking about some pretty big moves that are happening inside the division, and starting with the Baltimore Ravens signing Derrick Henry. So when you look back at last season, that was the issue that they had, right? It wasn't the edge rushers. It wasn't necessarily the secondary all the time. But in this division, you're going to have to be able to stop the run. It's what's defined the division. I think going back to the days of Ickey Woods and James Brooks and, all that, when we could run the ball and be able to do that, that was what was great. We don't know what happens with Nick Chubb in Cleveland. That's going to have a lot to do, but that team has been very devoted to trying to run the football. And of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's you just know right away that you go in there, that's going to be a part of the game and what you're going to have to be able to do. So I thought it was the right choice. I personally was semi-hoping they were, looking at a couple of these receivers I thought there were a ton of really good receivers through the first couple of rounds.
Right.
And I would have liked to have seen any of them, but there was a bit of a run on them as well. I think the Bengals were probably a little disappointed that they weren't able to get to some of those guys that really were, in my mind, could have been real factors for this football team. I mean, everybody knows Neighbors and Harrison and Dunze, in the top 10, but Brian Thomas and Mitchell and McConkey and, Ricky Pearsall ends up going in the end of the first round out of Florida to San Francisco.
Right.
Keon Coleman goes high in the draft to Buffalo, I think it was. So there was some real opportunities, but it was an amazing draft. I don't think I've ever seen an offensive draft as deep as this one. I mean, they just kept going offensive players. What was they get to number 10 or something before they ever took a defensive player.
Right.
So yeah, it was interesting. There were two great, I thought there were two top end defensive interior guys with Murphy and Johnny Newton. I personally loved Jared Verse, who came out of FSU. He was just a hammer, and athletic enough to be able to be a pass rushing presence as well. But, just plays, a little bit like, a Sam Hubbard kind of guy over there on the edge and how he could play. So it was, it was an interesting draft. I hope that they have the depth. What everybody does on the defensive line now, they try to go minimum 8 deep. They try to go to 10 deep if they can. And instead of those guys playing 1,000 snaps that the offensive linemen will play, they're playing 500, 600 if they're, top end kind of plays. But they want those guys fresh.
Absolutely. So the meat of the sandwich, I guess, between the two defensive players they drafted in the second and third round, the first third round draft pick, the 80th pick of the draft, wide receiver. You mentioned that, the guys that went in the first and second round. This This guy, the Bengals had rated as first-round talent, Jermaine Burton. He played, Georgia and Alabama, averaged, 18 yards a catch for his career, had a 20-yard average his last year down there. Obviously can run away from people. And you really have to scour tape to find a drop. And he comes from the TJ Hushmanzada school, and TJ, how he was with that route running. I mean, it's like change in speed. A 10-yard out is never the same. It's a different change of speed, accelerate, decelerate, a little wiggle, getting out of the cut differently. He's a very, very crafty route runner. How much did you like him as you looked at him pre-draft, Kris?
Yeah, I think you got him in the right category, sort of the Cooper Cup creative kind of thing. When I watched those guys play today, I was like, damn it, why didn't I do any of that? It's like, because it's the, we were all about change of speed, but we were also all about, you've got to scare people with speed right off the bat. So, but my thing was always, man, I'm winning the first 3-yard dash here. I may not be able to win the 100-yard dash, but I'm winning the 3-yard dash here. Try and get up on some people. But defensive backs at this level, it doesn't matter how fast you are. I mean, we've seen the fastest guys in the world, 4.2 speed guys, they can't get open. Ronaldo Nehemiah had no idea how to get open, the former hurdler,
Right.
But you've got to make them make mistakes. And so I think what these guys are doing now is they're taking that thought to the next level. So people are reading releases. So if you have an inside stem, then you'll see defensive backs falling behind them thinking they're breaking to the inside. And that is when they break to the outside. They've got a lot more option routes. Like an option route when we played was you could break left, you could break right, or you could turn around. That was an option route.
Right.
Now these guys have options to go to the post. And so they're really smart players that have these creative sort of Cooper Cup approaches to the game. And I think the Bengals are going to be fine, right? As long as T. Higgins didn't get out of here. So we can talk about the draft all we want, but the fact that he didn't get out of here is really the headline of the offseason.
No question. So I want to ask you, the Bengals draft a couple of tight ends, Erik, who unfortunately had a very, very severe knee injury. And Bengals had him projected as an early 3rd round guy, and they get him in the 4th. And then they also draft Tanner McLachlan out of Arizona. They had him, as high as a 4th round prospect, and they get him in the 6th. And with this Bengals offense with number 9 at quarterback, it's very receiver and tight end friendly. And I'm interested to see Gesicki. I mean, I think Gesicki is in the perfect place. I mean, Tanner Hudson, a couple of teams, no, he comes to Cincinnati. Oh my gosh, man, he's a perfect fit for what they're doing, because the tight end, they'll line him up in the slot. They'll line him up as the wide receiver. They line him up all over the place. These couple of tight ends that they drafted they're not participating in OTAs. They're recovering from injury. They may start the season, one of them anyway, on the PUP list. But Gesicki and these young guys and the tight end, like Danny Ross. He had Isaac Curtis, Cris Collinsworth, Danny Ross, middle of the football field with Kenny Anderson. It was like, man, taking candy from a baby. Do you think tight ends can flourish with a guy like Joe Burrow delivering the rock as well? I mean, it's a good situation for him, isn't it?
I wouldn't mind taking a shot at that. As long as his friggin' wrist is okay. I can't remember a quarterback that seems like the great majority of his injuries impact preseason, right? It's whether it was his knee, his wrist, it's just like, I was always just praying for this guy to have a normal preseason one time and be able to get through it. But
yeah,
anyway, back to your point, Gesicki he's much more of a receiver than he is, a blocker, and that's fine. Drew Sample is going to be the guy that'll I still think will play for the most part. Gesicki will end up being that sort of I don't want to put him in the Travis Kelce category, but that sort of you split him out a little bit, right? If you want him to block, you want him to block the strong safety, not the edge player that's over there. So anything that they get out of that, I'm guessing those other guys they're hoping they can fill in, as with blocking and with the fullback position to be able to, have some versatility out of the backfield. But it is going to be interesting to see, because now you don't have Joe Mixon, so there's some natural chemistry that went with that. And Zach Moss is clearly a guy that I've seen do it right in Indy and I think Indy, right? And Chase Brown proved enough last year that it's going to be fine. But again, you've got new people, right? You've got, it's not the people that Joe's been used to dealing with. So there is a learning curve that ends up going along with that.
And you talk about Joe and watching him throw at OTAs, Kris, man. I mean, he's putting some juice on the football. He's throwing with power and he's accurate. He's putting it where he wants to put it. And right now, I think, he just has to build up endurance. He needs reps to get the strength back, the overall strength. But, man, I watch him throw that football. It's like, ooh. And he's the kind of guy, he won't take a day off. So I think it's incumbent on the training staff to say, hey, Joe, let's just chill. Take a chill day here, and let it recover and then let's come back at it. But I look at it and I'm like, damn, being selfish, man, I wish Jamar Chase and T. Higgins were here, and Tyler Boyd's now a Tennessee Titan. But so, I mean, his top 3 receivers for the past however many years, none of them are there at OTAs for him to throw to. I mean, it just goes to show you how the NFL is a never-changing world, and you always have issues and dynamics and whatever goes on in the off seasons. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, you hit on with Tyler Boyd, and I know he's missed a couple of passes here and there, and blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. But Tyler Boyd was a presence in that slot, right? He was a guy, and that's the connection piece. And when I saw that Gesicki was coming in, I was like, is that maybe a replacement more for Tyler Boyd than it is the tight end position, somebody that just can, provide that quick check down? Because, as tough as it is to play coming off a knee injury the way that Joe did, there's got to be something in the back of your mind when you come off of a wrist injury and right wrist injury, when you start getting hit, right? To not put that hand on the ground, to not, it's not just like Joe's the coolest guy in the world. I mean, we've all seen him in the middle of the pocket and it's just collapsing around him and he's doing something crazy and making a great play. It's what makes him. And not that I think he's going to be scared, but again, this is a division that really helps if you're 3-1 at the end of the first quarter of the year, right? I mean, it's like you got to get out of the gate in this division. There isn't time for this ramp up period for Joe and his receivers and new running backs and new tight end to kind of come in here and get it going. Let's take September and warm up. You don't have that luxury when you're talking about this division. Of course, neither do the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are switching quarterbacks. So, but the team that you always have to keep your eye on, I mean, there's just no question it's Baltimore. But, it's going to be interesting with Cleveland as well this year. I mean, there's just not a bad team in that division right now.
I agree. There's no question. When I think about the slot position, I'm wondering, like you said, Gesicki is an option there. And I'm thinking, what about Burton? I mean, I know they'd like to have the receivers learn everything, not just slot, not just flanker, not just split end, X, Y, Z. They want them to be interchangeable. But if a rookie, I think it'd be good to maybe, learn this first. And I might put him in the slot first, provided Higgins does, play, which I think he will, and Chase. Okay, now have him in the slot and learn that. Okay, now start to learn what's going on the outside, because this might be the swan song for T. Higgins. You may be that outside guy down the road, but I'm wondering if they give him a point of emphasis, as a rookie. Okay, learn and earn this slot position. See how it works for you. Can you see him as a productive guy in the slot potentially?
Yeah, but I'll say, remember this, is that generally the slot guy has the most complicated job.
True.
And that's so.
Right.
How many times have we seen Travis Kelce sort of jog off the ball or chip somebody and then just sort of settle into a zone, and Mahomes knows right where he is,
Yep.
and gets him the ball, right?
Yep.
So that's really what the slot position is as well. You've got a ton of option routes. You've got a ton of, okay, and because I did some of this as my rookie year too.
Sure.
And so you get in there, and so if the linebacker is pressing you from inside out, now you want to turn out. If the pressure is more from the outside linebacker, now instead of starting in on the inside linebacker, you want to press the outside linebacker and turn in. Or if you're seeing it and it's a drop down, oh, that's man coverage, and now I've got a break to the out.
Right.
But now I've got this Pro Bowl slot corner jamming me at the line of scrimmage, and I've still got to watch for the safety blitz, because if the safety blitz comes, on my side, now I've got to break off quickly to a slant. I'll never forget Forrest Gregg one time. He comes over and he goes, you okay? And I go, yeah. And he said, everything good with your family? Everything going all right at home? I go, yeah. He said, well, then get your blanket head out of your blanket backside. I mean, chewed me out because I missed some safety blitz. And I'm like, oh my God, coach, I got all my hands full trying to get off the line of scrimmage against this guy, So, I mean, as a rookie, it literally can be overwhelming. And sometimes, as Kenny Anderson told me, he's like, look, just get somewhere fast. I'll find you. Don't worry about it. You just go fast. And I think that for Burton, the one thing that he's got to do to be a factor this year is live with your mistakes. You're not going to read every defense correctly. You're going to run the wrong play sometimes, but you've got a veteran quarterback and you've got a need out there for somebody to step up in that position in a big way.
Kris, I'll tell you, man, it's been unbelievably informative, as I knew it would be. You are a football guy in every sense of the word, and you teach it so easily. It's like so understandable when you're talking football. I love it. Was wondering if I might be able to sign off and then catch back up with you, do a little foreshadowing here, maybe like a 10-minute conversation about the Bengals schedule with Cris Collinsworth. Could we do that? Could we say, appreciate this one with the draft and catch back up and do a little schedule action? Does that work for your schedule, my man?
Yeah, sure. We'll do it. So we're saying goodbye here, and then we're coming back on.
Absolutely. It's going to be Cris Collinsworth, part 2, baby. I love it.
All right. You got it.
Appreciate it, my man.
All right, buddy. Good talking to you, Dave.
I'm here. Dave Lapham here, and every day I am grateful for my experience to have played professional football. As a player, I realize self-motivation, leadership, and appreciating your teammates are key. At First Star Logistics, you can use those same attributes to create the life you want for you and your family. Build your future by working hard like I did. You'll see results both on and off the field. Call First Star Logistics today and be part of our winning team.
Opportunity knocking.